Bonjour tout le monde. Aujourd'hui, on va discuter un petit peu le subjunctive. This is something that will continue to come up from French 2 all the way through AP. Will serve sort of as the starter video, a jumping off point getting into the subjunctive, and then we'll level up as you go throughout each level. So just a quick overview of what we'll go over. What is the subjunctive? When do you use the subjunctive? And how do you form it? So let's start with the part that I think is maybe the hardest to grasp because it's very theoretical grammar, but I want to be clear on the terminology that we're using. There's two ways to think about forming verbs in French. Almost everything we've talked about so far has been a tense. So you can talk about a verb tense or a verb mood. A tense is talking about when is it happening. Is it past, present, or future? So that's when you're changing the form of a verb to show kind of where on a timeline it happened. So for example, passé composé we've learned and parfait we've learned. Those are both past tenses. Present tense we've learned le présent, bien sûr. I put conditional under here, but you'll see why soon that doesn't really fit. And then for the futur, we've learned le futur proche, like I'm going to go to the store, and le futur simple, I will go to the store. Another way that you can think about verbs in French is by a mood, meaning is it a fact or is it a possibility? Is it reality or is it a wish? Is it a thing that's really happening or like you're talking about how it would be great if it did happen? And when we're talking about moods, we have 4 different moods. That's why I said the conditional kind of doesn't work great as a tense because it really is technically a mood. We have le conditionnel, so how you say that you would do something. We have l'impératif, right, giving directions. Because when you're giving directions, it may or may not actually be happening. It's just you telling somebody what to do. It's up to them whether or not it actually happens. We have l'indicatif and le subjonctif. All of these tenses that we've learned already fall into the category of l'indicatif, right? We're talking about things that are happening. Passé composé are things that in the past happened. Le présent is things that are currently happening in the present. Le futur proche and le futur simple are things that are going to happen in the future. So we're adding on our last kind of part of this puzzle of different verb moods, talking about le subjunctif. So it's just kind of another way. There are similar tenses within this mood. So there's past subjunctive, present subjunctive. We're just focusing on present for right now. So when do you use it? You use the subjunctive for verbs in French following different situations. One of those is wishes. So for example, in the sentence, I wish that we lived closer, that lived in French would be in the subjunctive. Emotions. She is sad that French class is almost over. That is coming after an emotional phrase, so that would be subjunctive in French. Impersonal expressions. It's important that you rest. It's essential that you rest. Recommendations or requests. Right? I want you to take notes. Take, right? Again, it's not happening just because I want it to. It may or may not. So voilà. Take, in this case, would be subjunctive in French. And doubts. He doubts that learning the subjunctive is fun. That is the part following the part about talking about the doubt would be subjunctive en français. And opinions, lastly. They love that they are learning a new verb mood. That are learning would be in the subjunctive in French. You're probably noticing a theme emerge of one key word that signals the subjunctive very often. We have that come up a lot, right? So you'll notice there's a phrase, then there's that, and then the next piece is what would be in the subjunctive in French typically. Here are some of those common phrases. I gave you examples in English, but here are some examples in French of common phrases that will often signal the subjunctive. First one and number 1 probably most used is il faut que, it's necessary that. Il est important que, or really take this template and replace important with almost any adjective, and that will also signal the subjunctive. I'm sure there's plenty of exceptions to that, but you'll notice that if you look up online a list of phrases that signal the subjunctive, you're going to see kind of a copy and paste of this over and over and over, but with just a different word instead of important. Je doute que, bien que, so even though or although, c'est dommage que, it's too bad that, il vaut mieux que, it's better that. In short, you can remember subjunctive and when to use it by the acronym WEIRDO, right? Wishes, emotions, impersonal expressions, requests, directions, and doubts and opinions. Also look out for verb phrases that end with que, like we talked about, that is typically a signal for the subjunctive. So once you figure out that you need the subjunctive, how do you write something in the subjunctive? Here's what you do for regular verbs. You conjugate that verb for the il, elle plural form. You drop the ent ending, and then you add your new endings. For je, you'll add I. For tu, you'll add es. For il, elle, iel, or on, you'll add I. For nous, you'll add ions. For vous, you'll add iez. And for il, elle, or iel, you'll add ent. One example is saying it's important that one works. So let's look through this example together. You'll start with the il, elle form, so il faut qu'on travaille. We'll drop the ent ending, and then we'll see what ending we need to add back. For on, in this case, it'd be I. Keep in mind, though, if there's no subject in the sentence and you're just saying it's important to work, and you're not saying it's important that you work, or that I work, or that she works, saying just it's important to work, you don't need to do all that, you just keep the infinitive. Il faut travailler. Voilà. As you probably know to expect by now, there's tons of irregular verbs as well. I'm just going to give you kind of the top most frequently used ones really quick. So for faire, don't follow those rules. It's just je fasse, tu fasses, elle fasse, nous fassions, vous fassiez, il fasse. For être, je sois, tu sois, elle soit, nous soyons, vous soyez, il soit. For avoir, j'aille, tu ailles, elle est, nous ayons, vous ayez, ils aillent. For aller, j'aille, tu ailles, elle aille, nous allions, vous alliez, ils aillent. Note that the L's come before the I just for nous and vous, otherwise we have I and then double L for each of these. Savoir, fun one to say, je sache, tu saches, elle sache, nous sachions, vous sachiez, il sache. So let's do some practice, test what you are able to do. I'll give you 3 sentences in English. Pause the video and see how you could write these out in the subjunctive where necessary. So step 1 is to decide, do you need to have the subjunctive? Step 2 is to write it in the subjunctive if needed. So we've got 3 sentences. It is important that you practice your French. It is necessary that you ask questions. And even though it's difficult, you can learn the subjunctive. So go ahead and pause and come back when you're ready to see the answers. Okay, so number 1, il est important que vous pratiquiez le français. This is in the subjunctive, but oftentimes the subjunctive ends up looking very similar to the indicative present tense. There are times where that won't be the case, but there will also be plenty of times where you feel like you're doing the same thing, and you are. With practice, you'll get used to kind of automatically remembering which cases it changes and which cases stay the same. It's necessary that you ask questions. Il est nécessaire que vous posez des questions. Again, another great example. This is in the subjunctive, even though it looks the same as the indicative present. Even though it is difficult, you can learn the subjunctive. Bien que ce soit difficile. Here we have the subjunctive of être. It is, ce soit difficile. Vous pouvez apprendre le subjonctif. Et voilà, ça c'est tout. There's plenty of practice that we'll do together, and let me know what questions you have.